Welcome to Math 126. I have looked through the beginning algebra book and have picked out 8 sections that I think are the most important for you to be successful in 126. To have this prerequisite knowledge of these 8 sections will help you to be successful in Math 126. So that's how we're going to start out the course. So it's going to skip around a little bit. We're going to start with 1-1 and then go to 1-4 and then 2-3 and then 2-6 and 2-7. So like I said, I just went, that's an important section. They can't do 126 if they don't know that. This is important, and so on. So it was my picking, and I just felt like these were the sections that were most important in order to be able to master the 126. So we're starting with 1-1 right at the beginning, solving linear equations. So linear equations means that if you were to graph them, they would graph as a line. And it also means there won't be any exponents, because when you have exponents in an equation, then they no longer graph as lines, they graph as curves. So linear equations just have one variable and no exponents. And like I said, if we were to graph them, which we will be doing later, they do graph as a line, hence the name linear. So to solve a linear equation, first we combine like terms and clear parentheses and clear fractions and decimals. So that's the first thing we do. So if there are any parentheses, go through and clear those. Clear fractions and decimals, and we're going to talk about how to do that later. We multiply, well, we might as well highlight it, multiply both sides of the equation by a common denominator. And I would have a highlighter out if I was you, probably easier than using a pen. And then that way you can highlight, because these notes will be handy for two things. One is they'll be handy because you can look at them to study for tests. Another is they're really helpful when you're doing the homework in ALEKS. So I try to do like an example, like one each of each kind that you're going to see in ALEKS. So lots of times you can look back at your notes if you're stuck on ALEKS and see the same problem in your notes. And then the last thing we do is combine like terms. So nothing to do with solving. This is just kind of getting the equation ready. So get rid of parentheses, get rid of fractions and decimals, combine all the like terms on the left and all the like terms on the right side of the equal. Then we use addition and subtraction to put the variables on one side, and I like them on the left. Because what I found is students that are kind of careless and go left and right, sometimes they end up dividing by the wrong number at the end because they're so used to having the variable on the left, and if it's on the right, they forget. The other reason is our next section is inequalities. You have to have the variable on the left in order to graph it correctly. So that's why I say just get in the habit with equations. Then when we do inequalities, which mean they have greater than, less than signs in the next section, you won't have to change any of your habits. So I always put the variable on the left, and then I always put the constants on the right. Constants are numbers without variables. A variable is a letter. So all letters go to the left. So just think of LL, letters left. Constants, things without letters, go right. Then we use usually division property, once in a while multiplication, but usually division property in order to, if it's 4x, you're going to divide both sides by 4 in order to make the coefficient, the number in front of x, 1. So we usually use the division property. And then all answers can be checked. Anytime your directions say solved, that tells you the problem can be checked. Okay? So, of course, I would probably do the test first, and then if you have time, go back and do the check. So let's put these steps into practice. So step 1 says clear parentheses. So I see parentheses here. So does everybody know this is multiplication? When there's a number beside parentheses, that means it's multiplication. So 8 times b is 8b. 8 times -2, -16. And then we bring down the plus 3b, bring down the equal, and then we have distribution again. -9 times b is -9b. Be careful with your sign here. -9 times -1 is +9. So, clear parentheses, done. Clear fractions and decimals, we don't have any, so we can check that off. Now we need to combine like terms on the left, combine like terms on the right. So over here on the left, and we only use the signs that are in front of each term, plus 8b plus 3b is positive 11b. And the -16 doesn't have anything to go with it, so it just stays. And then the -9b plus 9 does not have any like terms over there, so that stays. So now we have our like terms combined. So next it says use subtraction or addition property to move all the variables to the left. So I need this variable over to the left. And so whenever we're solving equations, we always do the opposite. So the opposite of -9b would be add 9b, add 9b, and always make sure you keep your like terms lined up because you can't add a b with a number. Okay, so that's going to leave us with, and see why we did the opposite here? Because we want it to cancel on the right side. So the opposite of subtract 9b, add 9b, then it cancels. So now you've satisfied step 2. All your variables are on the left. So this is 20b minus 16 equals 9. So let's move it up here. Okay, step 3 says now take all your constants, and like I said, constants are things that don't have a variable. That means they don't have a letter. So to move it right, I have to do the opposite since I'm crossing the equal sign. So I add 16, and I get 20b equals 25. Almost done. Step 4 is use multiplication or division, and like I said, it's usually division because this is 20 times b. So the opposite, like I said, anytime you're solving an equation, you do the opposite is to divide by 20. So I get b equals, and I'll start showing you how to use your calculator. So there's 2 ways you could write your answer, actually 3. You could write it as a mixed number, you could write it as an improper fraction, or you could write it as a decimal if the decimal terminates. If the decimal goes on forever, you can't write it as a decimal. So if you were doing it by hand, you would just do, oh, what goes into both of these? I know fractions have to be reduced. Oh, 5 goes into both of those. So when I divide them both by 5, I get 5 over 4. If you type it in your calculator, it's going to default to a mixed number, but I just want to show you how to do it. So you just hit 25, and this is your fraction bar 20, and it tells you it's 1 1/4, which 5/4 is 1 1/4. And then if you wanted to change it to a decimal, you could. I will tell you, I rarely change something to a decimal. Usually one of the few times I will is if we're doing money. So then a decimal makes sense, but usually I just leave it like improper fraction, mixed number, that's more for word problems. So this is how I would leave it personally, but of course I know that there's different forms. So if you wrote 1 1/4 or 1.25, I would count it right. Alex would count it right. But Usually I say, well, do the least amount of work necessary. Okay, that's it. So unless they tell me otherwise, I don't do any further work. So, and also this form is easier to check than this form. This is a little bit harder to check in your calculator, so that's why I like the improper. So let's go over here to the side and I'll show you how to do a proper check. So to do a proper check, you take your original problem, 8 times b minus 2 plus 3b equals negative 9 times b minus 1. And you rewrite it with that fraction in, and you're probably like, oh my gosh, that's going to be ugly. Doesn't matter. Guess what? You're doing it all on the calculator, so you could care less how ugly it is. So the calculator is going to do all the hard work. But this is a step if we were taking a paper pencil test. This is the step I would want to see. Original problem. Next step, plug that in for all the b's. See how there's 3 b's? So make sure you plug it in for all 3 b's. So it will be 8 parentheses 5/4 minus 2, close your parentheses, plus 3 times 5/4. And I'm going to get a number there, so I'll just put that there. Then on the other side, I'm going to type in negative 9 parentheses 5/4 minus 1, close parentheses. So if those two answers match, I go, yes, I did it right. If they don't match, well, first I would check your work here and make sure you wrote everything correct. If you can't find an error, then go over here and look. But if you've done the problem correctly, the two sides of your equation should always give you the same number. So let me show you how to type that for people that might not be real familiar with their calculator. Basically, you type it just like you see it. That's why I say I need to see this step written out. It's not just for me. I know you're probably going to get it right if you write it out first. It's the students that try and type it in without writing it out first that usually miss because they can't tell if they've made a mistake because they don't have it written out. So this will be 8. Then we hit the parenthesis key, which is right below cosine. And we're going to type in 5 fraction bar, that's the fraction key, 4. Then we do subtract 2, close parentheses. And then plus, and your calculator knows order of operations, that's why I never have to hit enter until the end. 3 times 5 fraction bar 4. Hit enter and write that number down. Negative 2 1/4. Write it down. Another. Negative 2 1/4. So if I get negative 2 1/4 here, woo, happy dance time. Then you can walk away and go, yes, I know I have that answer correct. So to check the second line, this right here, by the way, is a negative. This is subtraction. They're not interchangeable. So this is a negative here, so I use this sign. This is subtraction here, so I use this. Sometimes students go, well, I never know whether it's a negative or subtraction. Well, if it's in between two numbers, it's most likely subtraction. But here it's not, it's out in front. So be sure and use negative, and then 9, parentheses, 5 fraction bar 4 minus, and look at the difference between the negative and the minus. The negative is up higher and a little bit smaller. The minus is right in the middle of the screen and it's a little bit longer. So you can see the difference in looks as well. Let's say you accidentally put a minus sign out there, or a subtraction, accidentally. Watch what happens. My calculator tells me an error, and do you want to know something even cooler? And this is why I wrote this on your syllabus to get this one. Look how cool this calculator is. I hit clear, and it highlights where my error is. It goes, Hey, Norris, that's not supposed to be a subtraction. It's supposed to be a negative. So right on top of that blinking light,